This is the fourth episode under the theme of national trauma. For the first episode, we took a look at the war that swept the whole country. And for the second and the last episode, we took a look at two industrial disasters that not only killed many lives, but also revealed the rotten part of the wider society. And today, I'm introducing you a criminal that walked the concept of a psychopathic serial killer in Korean public's consciousness. Between September and November 2003, 9 people were found bludgeoned to death in their own homes in different parts of Seoul. They were largely elderly and an intellectually disabled man, basically the weaker and defenseless members of the society. The police determined it should be committed by the same perpetrator based on the very similar pattern of the crime and the footprint. But the investigation didn't come up with any strong lead. In 2004, the owners of call-in massage services started complaining their service girls going missing. Prostitution is officially illegal in Korea, and they often disguise the business in various forms of service to get around. Call-in massage service is often one such. For that reason, police didn't pay much attention to the missing reports, until the number reached 11. In the end, it was the owners of the massage business that came to the conclusion that all the missing cases led to one phone number that called for the service. The person behind the phone number turned out to be the man named Yoo Young-Chul. Soon the public was bombarded with shocking and sensational headlines about this new serial killer. 26 murder counts and claims of having eaten the victim's liver and brain. There have been, of course, serial killers in Korea in the past, but most of them were either a thief turned to killer or murders within family or circle of acquaintances for the reasons of inheritance or personal grudge. And most of them were caught before the number of victims exceeded 10. The concept of a prolific pleasure killer was, to most people's mind, something that had only existed in American thriller films. Soon the name of Yoo Young-Chul became synonymous with a psychopathic killer, a pure evil beyond the comprehension of ordinary people. The internet communities went busy with the discussions about what psychopathy is and what a psychopath is capable of doing. So-called tests for psychopathy, most of them were of course totally unfounded or fabricated, became also very popular. Later it was found Yoo Young-Chul actually killed 20 people, and the claim of cannibalism was most likely him playing grand for the media attention. Also, according to legitimate psychological evaluation, he scored just the lower end of psychopathic checklist. But once triggered people's imagination, was not affected by the facts, and his image as the evil psychopathic serial killer was forever sealed. As I mentioned in the previous episodes, storytelling is a human instinct, and it didn't take long for Yoo Young-Chul also turn into all sorts of mythical stories. Most of them are clearly fictions or ages-old urban myth repurposed. They all reveal the general angst of modern urban life, resurfaced by the case of Yoo Young-Chul. A lone individual disconnected from sense of community, brushing with numerous strange faces day by day, and one of them could turn out to be your killer for no good reason. The first two stories I'm going to read today clearly demonstrated. Facing an evil stranger in the confined space of the elevator in an apartment block, where there are no true neighbors who could come to the protagonist's rescue. Regardless of the fact Yoo Young-Chul never committed his murder in an apartment. But I also fished out two lesser-known stories regarding Yoo Young-Chul with a bit more paranormal elements. So, Here are 4 stories about Yoo Young-Chul, or shall I say, the public myth of a serial killer. As always, handpicked, translated and narrated by your host, Anthony. A teenage girl was on her way back home late at night. The elevator of her apartment block arrived. As soon as she hopped in, a strange guy got on too. His face was almost completely hidden behind a baseball cap and a face mask. The girl creeped out by the vibe the guy gave off and was almost about to get off the elevator. But another boy, looking a few years younger than she, joined in at the last second, and she decided to just stay on. The guy couldn't try anything when there's the boy too, she thought. But soon she realized her mistake. She herself was going to the 14th floor and the creepy guy to the 18th floor, but the boy was going just to the 6th floor, meaning she will be left alone with a guy with a mask. While she was thinking what to do, the elevator arrived at the 6th floor, and the boy was about to get off. "Hey, Chul-soo, are you going home?" she called out. She didn't know the boy at all, but was desperate to hold him back. "How did the test go? You asked me about this and that yesterday." She just carried on, not knowing where it might go. The boy turned around to look at her and said, "It was okay. Oh, you left something behind yesterday. Do you want to come and pick it up now?" A perfect context for her to get off the elevator with the boy. As soon as the elevator door closed, the boy told her that he saw the creepy man holding what looked like a knife hidden in his pocket, and so he came to her rescue. Just 3 days later, the girl was shocked by the news report about the arrest of a serial killer named Yoo Young-Chul. It was that creepy guy in the elevator. My sister-in-law has a younger sister, and apparently she escaped from the hand of the notorious serial killer Yoo Young-Chul. She is married and has a baby son. As she worked herself, the baby son was usually left with her parents during the day, and she would pick him up on the way back from work. It was one such usual evening going back home with her baby in her arms. On her way to the elevator, she passed a man looking at the communal notice board. His eyes were hidden under the baseball cap. She just assumed that he might be a delivery guy or something. But right before the elevator door closed, the guy ran over and hopped in. She slowly realized something was not quite right. The guy kept his hands in his jacket pockets, visibly fiddling with something. She checked what it could be out of the corner of her eyes. It was a rolled-up newspaper, and inside the roll was a handle of a knife barely visible. A robber? Or a murderer? Feeling her life hanging on a thread, her survival instinct kicked in. She looked in the face of her baby son and started talking. "So, did you have a good day with Grandma, dear Chunho? Been a good boy, huh? Chunho is such a good boy, aren't you? Mom is sorry she can't be with you every day, but Mom has to work so she can buy you toys and sweets. Chunho, say hello to Mister here. Hello. You can say hello now, can't you?" Using the baby talk as the pretext, she tried to involve the guy in, hoping to earn his sympathy. But the guy didn't respond at all despite her several attempts. All the while his hands were kept fidgeting in his pocket, and his eyes, behind the shadow from his cap, were busy rolling in all directions. Later she described how chilling the eyes were. They were that of a predator focusing on his prey. Her heart froze. Meanwhile, the elevator arrived at her floor and the door opened, but she didn't move. After a few seconds of intense silence that felt like forever, the man got off first. Seeing him heading to the staircase and walking down, she shot out and ran to a door. Just then, she heard footsteps running back up from the stair. There wasn't enough time to unlock the door before the guy would catch up. She started ringing the doorbell and calling out for her husband, in full knowledge her husband could not be home yet. "Honey, Juno's home. Open the door." "What's taking you so long? Are you sleeping?" From the peripheral vision, she could see the guy looking at her from the end of the corridor. As she carried on ringing the bell and calling for her husband, the man finally turned around and started going. Grabbing the moment, she quickly took out her key from her bag, but the key slipped and fell on the floor, clinging loudly in the empty corridor, followed by loud footsteps running back to her. The guy must have realized she was faking. With the mad footsteps closing in, she managed to open the door, but before she could lock it up from inside, the guy snatched up the door handle and violently rattled to open. His survival instinct was stronger than the mother's instinct. She threw away the baby in her arms to the floor and held onto the door for her dear life, before she could finally latch the lock. She locked herself in the bathroom with the baby crying his head off, till her husband returned home. A few weeks later, from the news reports, she realized that the guy in the elevator was Yoo Young-Chul. No wonder he showed not a shred of empathy for being a psychopathic killer. I was born with a spiritual gift. It's not anywhere in the level of professional shamans as to be able to predict the future, etc., but I can vaguely sense the presence of ghosts. It was during those strangely empty and lost months between the SAT and the start of the university. Enjoying the sudden freedom, I spent many evenings with drinks and friends. And it was one such night on my drunken way back home when I first saw it. Usually all I could see of ghosts were a hazy, whitish figure like a fog. But it was distinctive and had dark aura about it. I took a different way back home to avoid passing by it. But it was still there the following night, and the night after. It seemed only taking up even more distinctive shape and giving off even bigger presence as time passed, unlike most other ghosts I had seen. About a month later, I had a glass or two too much, and friends were helping me back home. I was so drunk that I forgot to tell them to take the different way, and we ended up passing right through that ominous presence. And that was the first time I actually heard a ghost saying,
"Not him. Not him. Neither him. No him."
It said, looking at my friends and me one by one. I was so creeped out by its unworldly voice, I just ran off, leaving my confused friends behind. As the university started, I got a room near uni and forgot about the strange ghost a while. Till a friend told me this about 6 months later, that Yoo Young-Chul, the serial killer, was caught after a chase with the police because he tripped over and fell, and apparently was on the same street where I saw the ghost. Only then I remembered what I read from the article describing how he was caught. That Yoo Young-Chul on the run seemed to get startled by something and fell on the ground, which allowed for the police to catch up. I theorized the dark ghost I saw was the accumulation of the resentful souls of Yoo Young-Chul's victims. As he killed more and more people, it got darker and more distinctive, until it got finally strong enough to be able to intervene with the business of the living. And when the time came, it indeed did. I remember what my grandma once told me, that killing a man means killing himself. When I first heard it, I assumed she was talking about the weight of conscience. But now, I think she meant the resentful soul of the victim coming back for revenge. Back in 2006, I worked at a dance club. I got along well with the other staffs and colleagues, and especially became close friends with one of them. Let's call him Young-Chul. Young-Chul was one of such country boys who moved to a big town with a bit of vain fantasies. He came to Seoul with just a few pennies in his pocket and got just small salary as a newbie staff in the club. Nevertheless, he dreamed of the day to get a modern flat of his own, what we call an office-tel. In the downtown of Seoul, renting a whole flat would have been impossible with his income level. And yet, one day he came to work smiling ear to ear. He found a flat that he'd been dreaming, not even far from the club. He invited me and other colleague on an upcoming day off. It was small, about 50 square meter, but clean. Could he really afford such a place? "Wow, what's the rent?" I asked. "Very cheap, 3 million deposit and 150,000 monthly rent," he said. That's approximately 2,600 deposit and 130 monthly in US dollar, about a half of the normal rent range in the section of the town. "No way, are you serious?" "It can't be that cheap unless it comes with some issues," I said. "I don't really care if it's haunted. I have never seen a ghost anyway," he said. Whatever. We decided to help him cleaning and tidying the place. Young-Chul made a break, smoking, looking out the window. Then suddenly we heard him shouting, "What? What do you want?" looking down the street. "What's wrong?" I asked. "There are some passerbys pointing fingers at me," Young-Chul said. "At you? Are you sure?" I said. "Yeah, right at me. What the F?" Anyway, we got on with the cleaning and saw lots of dead insects inside the glass shade of the ceiling light. So we took the shade off to clean, and it revealed some stain that was hidden behind. Dark, almost black-brown stain. We all looked up at it in silence. The other colleague was the first to speak out while we were all thinking. "That's blood?" "Shit, something must have really taken place in this flat," I said. "Never mind. I'm not afraid," Young-Chul insisted. Not long after, Young-Chul started dating a female colleague. She too was a country girl who came up to Seoul barehanded, and it didn't take long she moved into Young-Chul's place. But not even a week later, he informed me that the girl moved out again. Broken up already? I asked. No, it's not that, Young-Chul said. Apparently for those 4 nights his girlfriend stayed together, she suffered terrible sleep paralysis the whole time. Having been terrorized by multiple figures strangling and stabbing her with big knives, she was not herself anymore by the end of the 4th night. Young-Chul himself could not just brush it off anymore and visited the real estate dealer, but could only hear an excuse that was clearly a lie. The previous tenant had to go overseas all of a sudden, that's why. And one day, Young-Chul happened to finish work a bit earlier than usual, which led him running into his next-door neighbor for the first time. And the neighbor, upon seeing Young-Chul entering his flat, visibly blanched. And then, for lunch, he had Chinese food delivered. And he heard the delivery man saying to himself, "Well, however they found a new tenant." "What did you say?" Young-Chul asked. "What? Oh, nothing. I didn't say anything." "Please, just tell me, what's wrong with this flat?" "Nothing. I know nothing," the delivery guy said and went off. Now all irritated than anything else, Young-Chul jumped down to the restaurant on the ground floor of the same building. He got hold of the owner and explained straight that he was the new guy in the flat number so-and-so and asked to tell him whatever had happened there. The owner's face hardened but blankly denied of knowing anything. He realized he had to get smarter. He went to a hair salon nearby, pretending to be a normal customer, and nonchalantly dropped his line to his hairdresser. "So, I heard something terrible happened in that building over there. Is that true?" "Oh, don't even remind me of that. It was terrible," said the hairdresser. But it didn't take long before she carried on talking about it all. His new flat had been occupied by Yoo Young-Chul, the famous serial killer, and he killed 11 of his victims there. Living in that small flat, he used to get water bills of 700,000 won, over $600, because he washed down the blood from the dismembered bodies of his victims. In the building was a laundrette, and he apparently used tumble dryer there to dry out the body parts wrapped up in the blanket. It didn't take long for Young-Chul to move out of the place. Hi, it's Anthony here, and thank you very much for your listening. I didn't mention in the introduction because my focus is on the mythification of Yoo Young-Chul, but he was eventually sentenced to death for 20 counts of murder. But he's still alive and well behind the bar, as South Korea has not executed the capital punishment over 2 decades. There had been a recent report of how he's been utilizing the legendary status created by the media and public's imagination and bullying other inmates and prison staff, saying, "I am the psychopath, don't you know me?" Well, there's the side effect of sensationalization of a criminal. But then again, it's a human instinct to love a good story, whether it's true with the context or not. Surely the viewers of my channel should understand. And by the way, if you're interested, there's also a film that took the motive from Yoo Young-Chul's case, called The Chaser. It's a well-made thriller by its own right, and I recommend you to check it out if you're interested. Anyway, this is the last episode of the National Trauma for now. I'll come back with hopefully slightly more light-hearted stories for the next. Until then, stay safe and take care.